Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into something really important for any relationship that's doing well: intimacy.
Yeah.
And I know what you might be thinking, but stick with us here. We're going way beyond just the basics here. Um, we're going to explore all the different ways we experience intimacy because it's a lot more than just the physical stuff.
Right. We're going to unpack all the different dimensions of intimacy. We're drawing insights from our main source, the importance of intimacy.
Yeah, and you might be surprised by how many different sides to this concept there are.
You might be.
The importance of intimacy actually outlines 5 different types of intimacy:
5.
emotional, physical,
Yeah.
intellectual, spiritual, and get this, experiential intimacy.
That's right.
So many different flavors of closeness, right?
It's amazing how all of these intertwine, to create that sense of deep connection that I think we're all kind of looking for in relationships.
Lovely.
They're like ingredients
Yeah,
in a recipe.
perfect analogy. So let's break them down one by one, starting with emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get tripped up on what that really means, beyond those big Hollywood gestures we always see.
Yeah. Think of emotional intimacy as the ability to really let your guard down with your partner. It's about sharing, your inner world, your fears, your dreams, your insecurities, and, without the fear of being judged or dismissed.
So it's about creating that safe space to really be yourself,
Exactly.
knowing that your partner's going to be there to accept and validate your feelings.
Exactly. And being seen and understood, really at your core, that's where that true emotional intimacy starts to grow.
And that makes me think about how our early experiences really shape our ability to be emotionally intimate.
Oh, for sure.
Isn't there a psychological theory that kind of unpacks all that?
There's something called attachment theory.
Okay.
It suggests that our bonds with our caregivers from way back when really influence how we approach intimacy as adults.
Fascinating. So does that mean that if you didn't have that secure, foundation in childhood,
Yeah.
that you're kind of doomed when it comes to emotional intimacy?
Not at all. While early experiences definitely play a role, we're not just products of our past.
Yeah.
We can, with awareness and effort, we can learn to build healthier attachment patterns
Okay, good.
and develop our capacity for emotional intimacy.
I like that.
You're not stuck.
Not stuck, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a type of intimacy that I think often gets all the attention.
Yeah,
Physical intimacy.
of course.
So obviously we're not just talking about sex here.
We're not, no.
It's got to be more than that.
It's a much broader spectrum of affectionate touch.
Okay.
Holding hands, cuddling, a comforting hug.
All that good stuff.
All those things can be really powerful.
I'm curious though, why is physical touch so powerful when it comes to intimacy? It seems like something we often take for granted.
It is.
We do.
Well, think about it. Touch is one of our primary senses. It's a really fundamental way that we connect with others.
That's true.
And, there's even scientific evidence to back this up.
He's
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, places touch as a really basic human need
wow.
for love and belonging.
That's so interesting.
So it goes way beyond just feeling good. It's about feeling safe, secure, connected, on a really primal level.
Yeah, it really makes you realize the power of those small, everyday gestures of affection.
It does. It does, like a simple touch on the arm,
Yeah.
a hug at the end of a long day.
Yeah.
Those seemingly insignificant moments can go a long way.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about intellectual intimacy. So does this mean we need to be constantly debating with our partners
Right.
to build that strong bond?
Well, not necessarily arguing,
Okay.
but it is about engaging in conversations that provoke thought. Intellectual intimacy thrives on sharing ideas and perspectives and knowledge.
Oh.
And it's about respecting each other's minds.
Right.
Even when you don't agree on everything.
So it's more about that shared joy of exploring and learning from each other
It is.
rather than trying to win every argument.
Exactly. Intellectual intimacy thrives on curiosity and a real genuine interest in understanding your partner's worldview
Yeah.
and recognizing that differences in opinions can actually make the relationship stronger
Right.
rather than causing conflict.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
All right. On to something a little bit more intangible. Spiritual intimacy. I think this is where a lot of people get kind of confused.
Yeah.
Does this mean you have to share the same religious belief system?
Not at all.
Okay.
Spiritual intimacy is about connecting on that deeper level,
Okay.
beyond just the day-to-day stuff.
Well.
It's about sharing values and beliefs and aspirations. And those can be rooted in, religion
Right.
or philosophy or simply a shared sense of purpose.
So it's more about that feeling of being aligned, being on the same wavelength when it comes to the bigger picture.
Yes, exactly. And this aligns with, Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious,
Yeah.
which suggests that, like, we all have this innate longing for
Sure.
meaning and connection beyond ourselves, and spiritual intimacy taps into that shared yearning.
I like that. Okay, last but not least, experiential intimacy. What is that all about?
It's all about the bond that forms through doing things together, having experiences together.
Okay.
It's about making memories together, whether that's trying a new hobby or going on an adventure or even just tackling a DIY project together.
Oh, so it's about those moments where you're both like fully present and engaged,
Yes,
creating that shared history as a couple.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome. Those shared experiences, both good and bad, they build a sense of we're in this together.
Totally.
And it really strengthens that bond.
I remember this one time.
Welcome back to our deep dive into intimacy. So we've talked about all the great stuff, all the wonderful aspects of intimacy, but what about the other side of the coin?
It can't always be sunshine and roses, can it?
Right.
And I have a feeling this is where things might get a little tricky.
It does get a little complex.
Are you saying there's ways intimacy can go wrong?
Yeah, the importance of intimacy actually talks about this.
Oh, it does it.
There's a whole section on what it calls misplaced intimacy.
Misplaced intimacy. Okay, I'm listening.
Okay, so essentially it's about giving the intimacy that you should be reserving for your primary relationship to someone else,
Okay.
crossing those boundaries,
So you're talking about things like emotional affairs or even physical infidelity,
Yeah.
where you're sharing that deep connection, that vulnerability with someone other than your partner.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I imagine that can be super damaging.
Extremely damaging. And here's the thing, it's not always a deliberate act of betrayal.
Is it not?
It can happen slowly, sometimes even unconsciously, especially these days when we're all so connected.
Yeah, I get that. I can see how lines can get blurred pretty easily.
Mm.
Say you're venting to a coworker about some problems you're having at home, and suddenly you're sharing things you haven't even told your partner,
Yeah, it happens.
and you've crossed the line.
Yeah. And that's why it's super important to set clear boundaries in your relationship.
Okay.
It's about being honest with your partner,
Yeah.
having open conversations
Mm-hmm.
about what's okay and what's not okay when it comes to, interacting with other people.
So it's not about being controlling or possessive.
Right.
It's about protecting that intimacy you've built and making sure it's not at risk.
Exactly. Think of boundaries like creating a safe space for your relationship. It's about respecting each other's feelings
Mm-hmm.
and being thoughtful about the choices you make. Choices that put your relationship first.
So how do you actually go about setting those boundaries? It seems like, I don't know, it's kind of a touchy subject sometimes.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's definitely a conversation that requires, honesty and being sensitive to each other. It's about expressing your needs really clearly, but also being open to hearing what your partner has to say.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between what each person needs and what's best for the relationship.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that boundaries can change.
Oh, okay.
They're not set in stone.
Right.
They can evolve as your relationship grows and changes.
So something that felt okay a few years ago might need to be revisited.
Exactly. Life happens.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to adjust.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's not like a one-time conversation.
Right.
It's an ongoing thing.
It is.
And speaking of crucial things for a healthy relationship, what about trust?
Ah, yes. Trust. That's like the foundation for intimacy to really grow.
Totally.
If you don't have trust, how can you open up and be vulnerable with your partner?
Right.
It'd be like building a house on, a shaky foundation.
Yeah. It would. So how does trust play into those boundaries and misplaced intimacy?
Well, when you set boundaries and you talk openly about them, you're showing your partner that you respect them and their feelings. And that you want to protect the connection you've built.
Okay, so setting boundaries isn't just about preventing those missteps. It's about making that trust even stronger.
Exactly. It's about showing them that you're reliable. You value their feelings.
But what if trust has already been broken?
Hmm.
Because of misplaced intimacy or some other betrayal? Can it ever fully come back?
That's something a lot of couples struggle with, and there isn't a simple answer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It depends on a lot of things. How bad was the break? Are both people willing to work on it?
Right.
And how committed to the relationship are they?
So it's not impossible, But it takes a lot of work and honesty from both sides.
Absolutely. And often, it might even require getting some professional help, like a therapist or a counselor, someone who can give them a safe space to work through all the, hard stuff.
That makes sense. Sometimes it helps to have someone from the outside looking in.
It does.
Now, the importance of intimacy also talks about some psychological and sociological theories, right?
It does, yeah.
That help explain all this, the intimacy, the trust, the boundaries. What are some of the main things we can learn from those?
Well, we already talked about attachment theory a bit.
Right.
It's important to keep in mind that our early attachment experiences really can affect how we approach relationships as adults.
So if you had what they call a secure attachment when you were a kid, you might be better at trusting your partner and setting those boundaries.
That's the idea, yeah. They're more comfortable with intimacy, less worried about rejection or being abandoned.
But even if you don't have that secure attachment style, can you still learn to be better in your relationships?
You can. It's all about understanding yourself. Once you know your attachment style, you can see those patterns and work on creating more secure and fulfilling relationships.
I like it. What other theories does the importance of intimacy talk about?
It also mentions Sternberg's triangular theory of love.
Oh, okay.
It's really interesting. It helps us understand the different parts of a healthy relationship.
So what are the 3 points of this love triangle?
According to Sternberg, love is made up of intimacy, passion, and commitment.
Okay.
Intimacy is that closeness, that feeling of knowing and connecting with someone. Passion is the excitement, the attraction, that spark.
Right.
And commitment is that choice to stay together, to face those challenges, and make the relationship last.
So to really make a relationship work, you need all 3.
Exactly. Each one is important. Without intimacy, things might feel empty. Without passion, things might be a little boring.
Yeah.
And without commitment, the relationship might fall apart.
That's a great way to put it. It's like having all the right ingredients.
It is.
And, I imagine these things can change over time.
They do. They ebb and flow.
So it's not about finding the perfect balance of all 3. It's about being aware of them and working on all of them.
Right. Relationships take work.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
There's a theory in The Importance of Intimacy that looks at relationships from like a sociological point of view.
Yeah. It talks about something called social exchange theory.
Okay.
It says that we tend to think about what we get out of a relationship, even if we don't realize it.
It sounds a little, I don't know, cold.
It can sound that way.
Yeah.
But it's not just about material things. It's about those deeper things we look for in relationships. Things like companionship, support, feeling valued and loved.
And feeling intimate.
And intimacy, those are the things that make us feel connected.
So in this view, intimacy is something we get out of a relationship.
It is.
And the more of it we experience, the better we feel about the relationship.
It's like a loop. The more we put in, the more we get out, which then makes us want to put in even more.
So even from a sociological perspective, intimacy is really important for how we form and maintain relationships. It's not just about feelings, it's about how we think about our connections.
You got it. And it's not just about how much intimacy there is, but the quality.
Oh, yeah.
The more real and deep that connection is, the more rewarding it feels and the stronger the bond becomes.
This has been fascinating.
It has.
We've talked about all the different sides of intimacy, the potential problems, and how it all works from different perspectives.
Yeah, but we're not done yet.
We're not.
There's still more to explore. In the final part, we'll bring it all together and focus on how we can use all of this knowledge to have...
So don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive, where we'll talk about how to put all of this into practice and give you some tips to nurture intimacy in your own life. All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. In this last part of our exploration of intimacy, we're going to move from the theory to the practical stuff.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot, the different types of intimacy, the things that can go wrong, and all those psychological and sociological factors that are at play. But now the big question is, how do we use all this knowledge to actually build those stronger, more fulfilling relationships in our own lives?
Right, that's what we're all here for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure our listeners are dying to hear those practical tips, those things they can start using today.
Yeah, for sure.
So where do we begin?
Well, I think it all starts with knowing yourself.
Okay.
Taking a really honest look at what you need in relationships and what patterns you tend to fall into.
So kind of figuring out your own personal intimacy blueprint.
Right. Exactly. What makes you feel connected? What are your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to intimacy?
I like that, yeah.
And just as important is realizing that intimacy is a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about what you need, but also understanding your partner's needs and how you can meet those.
And that takes us right back to one of the big things we've been talking about, communication.
Yeah, it always comes back to that.
Being able to say what you need, but also really listening to your partner.
Absolutely. Communication is like the bedrock of any good relationship, but it's especially important when we're talking about intimacy. You've got to create that safe space where you can both be yourselves, share those deep thoughts and feelings, and not be afraid of being judged.
But communication isn't just about talking.
Right.
It's about listening too. So how can we be better listeners in those really intimate conversations?
You hit it right on the head. It's about being present, like really, truly present. Put your phone down, make eye contact, and really listen to what your partner is trying to tell you.
So it's both about expressing yourself and being open to what your partner is saying.
Exactly. And it's something you got to work on all the time. It's not just a one-time conversation. You got to check in with each other regularly, share what's going on, and be open to hearing feedback.
And I imagine this becomes even more important as relationships grow and change. You
For
know,
sure.
life throws us curveballs, we change as people. How do we keep that intimate connection going strong through all of that?
You're so right. Like we talked about earlier, you've got to be flexible and adapt. What worked in the beginning might not work 10 years down the road. You have to be willing to change to find those new ways to connect as you both grow.
It's a good reminder that relationships take work.
Yeah, they do.
It's so easy to fall into routines and just kind of, take each other for granted.
It is. And it doesn't always have to be about big gestures or fancy date nights, although those are great too.
Yeah.
Often it's just about being aware of those small moments of connection. A hug before work, laughing at a silly joke together, those little things really add up.
I love that. Noticing those little bits of intimacy that make up our relationships, those little sparks that remind us why we're with this person.
Exactly. And those small moments, they become even more important when things are tough.
Mm-hmm.
When you're stressed or arguing, it's easy to pull back, but that's when you need that closeness the most.
Right. So it's about making the effort to stay connected, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's about being there for each other and remembering that you're in it together.
Yes, exactly. It's about choosing to connect rather than fight, even when it's tough.
Yeah.
Now, I want to bring back something we mentioned earlier, the idea that intimacy has a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
The importance of intimacy talks about how good, healthy intimacy doesn't just help our romantic relationships, but can actually make other parts of our lives better too.
Really? How so?
Well, when you feel loved and supported and connected in your main relationship, it gives you this sense of security. And that can boost your confidence, lower your stress, and even improve your overall well-being.
So it's like that feeling of connection spreads out and affects how we interact with everyone.
Exactly. And it's not just romantic relationships. Building intimacy in our friendships, with our families, even in our communities, it can make a huge difference in how happy and fulfilled we feel.
That makes me think about how all those principles we've been discussing, the communication, the trust, the boundaries, the flexibility, they all apply to any relationship, not just romantic ones.
You're right. Intimacy, in whatever form it takes, is super important for feeling connected to others. It makes us feel alive, loved, and part of something bigger.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that intimacy isn't a finish line, it's a journey. It's this constant process of growing, discovering, and connecting. And it takes effort, vulnerability, and being willing to embrace the messiness of human relationships.
It's not about reaching some perfect level of intimacy. It's about putting in the work and letting those connections grow.
Exactly. It's about showing up, being present, and continuing to invest in those relationships that matter most to us.
So well said. And remember, like the book says, keep learning. There are tons of great books, articles, and resources out there to help you on your intimacy journey. We'll share some of our faves in the show notes.
And we always love hearing from you. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or any questions you might have on social media using #TheDeepDive.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing world of intimacy. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep